Good afternoon, my friends. It's 2 o'clock. It's time for the pastor's chat. It's a time to check in, time for the pastor to check in. I don't know how these times function for you, but I can tell you, for me, they're good for me. I'm often here, sometimes I'm here early, sitting at the desk and thinking about what's happening in my life and where my life feels to be headed, where it's been. I've said this before, but it may not seem particular enough, but one of the reasons that I like church, I like a church community, is because that a church community, when it's on target, is given to having deep conversations. And by deep, I mean to talk about the things that matter. It doesn't mean that's all we do. We do say hello, how are you, and all the rest of those social pleasantries, but we're not afraid to ask the deeper question or to answer the question a little more sincerely. Just a little more. It only takes a little bit. How are you doing? Well, and maybe that's enough. Just a little pause and a well tells us that the answer that's coming is something that invites us into a little closer belonging, a little closer awareness of each other. So, Pastor's Chat is a time, even if you're not in the room here with me or sitting in this chair next to me, it's a time for you to try to summon what your answers to these questions would be. How are you? I mean, really, how are you? How are you doing? This question gets answered one way in the grocery store and an entirely different way in the pastor's office. How are you doing? Sometimes I ask the question knowing some of what's going on in your life, knowing that perhaps I might know that you've lost someone that you care about, or a pet has died, or I might know that you've recently been sick and that you're just recovering enough to be here present. So when I ask, how are you doing? Sometimes there's an assumed knowledge. But sometimes folks come in to talk to me in my office and I don't really have any idea why now. Why are you choosing to come and talk and to go deep or to share something about your life with at least one other human being? So how are you doing? How are you doing today? The theme that I've been working on for the pastor's chats for this week. By the way, I'm Pastor Lou Kilgore. I am here in the good company of the High Mountain Presbyterian Church community. We're in Franklin Lakes, New Jersey, and also in North Haledon, New Jersey. I've been here as a pastor now for 10 years, and I love it here. I love the experience of God that I have had in Bible studies and in deep learning and in questioning and even some of the struggle for how shall we live together as a community. Problems arrive and then we solve them and we move on, and it just feels like a good life. It feels like a good life here. So how are you? In this season, post-Pentecost, there's my yawn, almost always exactly 7 minutes after 2. I was reading one author who was writing to sort of deepen our understanding about the season that we're in and the season of post-Pentecost. And this writer chose to describe the changes that took place in Jesus' followers pre-Pentecost and then post-Pentecost. And some of what happened was dramatic change in them. Prior to the appearances in the resurrection, and then after the Pentecost, Peter and James and John, they were, I don't know, it's enough to say they were not very assertive, but they were quite shy. They were afraid of being associated with Jesus, and so they tried to do nothing on the outward sense of themselves. But after Pentecost, after that experience of the power of God infusing them, they not only didn't care if people knew and associated them with Jesus, they were proud of it. They were proud of it. They were happy to say, yes, you're right. You saw me with Jesus. And you see that the power and the work of Jesus' life is continuing through me. There's a story in Acts where I think it's Peter and John pray for a man who has some kind of crippling disease. And when they pray for him, he's able to get up and walk. And it causes quite a controversy, so that the religious authorities, the sort of truth and practice commission of the synagogue, summons them to give account for their behavior. And they simply say, like so many of the experiences of Jesus, this man was sick, we prayed for him, and he's better. He's up, he's walking around. We don't know what else to tell you other than that. And the leaders of the Sanhedrin they dismiss them, and they meet by themselves, and they say, listen to each other, these disciples are associated with Jesus. And the crowds are impressed by what they say. They're impressed by how they explain the message of the gospel. Crowds really like these disciples. And now look, here's a man who had a crippling disease, and he's better. We probably shouldn't say anything. We probably shouldn't try to punish these, because a whole new level of rebellion might break out. And there was something about the confidence of these disciples now, which led the leaders of the Sanhedrin to say, look, let's just tell them to get out of town and never speak of Jesus, and never do anything like this again, and then we'll be better off, because otherwise we're going to have to deal with this mob of people. The scripture says that on the day of Pentecost, thousands and thousands of people became part of the Jesus movement. They confessed their sins. They owned up to the brokenness of their life, and they asked for forgiveness, and they moved in as a part of the community of love and faith and grace, and they began to eat at these table fellowship meals where their lives and the differences of their lives just fell away, and they were captured by a vision of a different way of being human, of being together, being honest and working through the problems, but together nonetheless. Breaking bread together was the sign of Jesus. People sat down and they ate meals together. So thousands have become part of this movement now. And the religious authorities are saying, we better be careful here. Let's just yell at these guys and tell them to get out of town. And so they bring, I think it's Peter and John, they bring them back into the tribunal room, and they say to them, listen, we want you to stop talking about Jesus. We want you to let go of this. We're not going to punish you now. You just agree to be quiet. And Peter, Peter, the transformed one, the one who now seems fearless in front of all this, he says, you know what? I don't really know. I haven't really thought through the whole right or wrong of disobeying you when you tell us to stop preaching. I don't really know how that is in the courts of heaven. Because after all, you are the spiritual leaders of the community. And if you tell us to be quiet and you tell us to stop talking about Jesus and stop associating ourselves to Jesus, I mean, there's something to that. But he says, when I think about disobeying you and wondering how God is feeling about us disobeying you or disobeying God, who told us to tell the story of Jesus, to preach with boldness, to go into all the world, to invite people to confess the sins of the brokenness of the way we treat one another, of the prejudice and the hatred and the anger, confess that sin, be baptized and be made new into a whole community of people. This word we have received from God. So, if it's all right with you, we're going to disobey you. And we are going to obey God. And the Sanhedrin says, well, just don't ever come back here again. Now go. It's beautiful. The confidence and the strength and the new life that these followers of Jesus have received. This fire of flame that appeared on Pentecost Day, whatever it was a refiner's fire that purified in them their understanding that life with Jesus was the life worth living. And they were going to teach and preach about the good news of the gospel of God, even if it meant that their lives would be forfeit. They were ready to do it. And on this weekend, we are, on Memorial Day, we are recognizing this tremendous human capacity. Now, sometimes it's for causes that we all celebrate. Sometimes it's for causes that we don't agree with, but there is this capacity of human beings to take stock of the challenge in front of them and to decide that what we want together is worth giving up their own life for. And then on Memorial Day, we try as best we can to stop everything of the busyness of our lives and give credit where credit is due, to say we owe a huge debt of gratitude to those who have died to keep the pathway of life open for us, to keep freedom at work, to raise the cause of justice, to overcome oppression. And, you know, of course, I think immediately of World War II and the incredible efforts that were spent, lives poured out to break the back of the terrorist and oppressive regimes of the Nazis, of Japan and the Germans, and their efforts to take over the world and to run the world through totalitarianism. I think about others whose lives have been lost in less than clear campaigns, the messiness and the muck of Vietnam, but still the same presence is there of those who go forward to say, to advance the cause of what, however ethereal, American dream or the American freedom or the idea of justice for all, lives spent, blood spilt in the pursuit of that. This willingness, not that they wanted to die, but the willingness to die if that's what it took, to preserve life and liberty for others. It's an ominous thing. It is. Jesus himself said, "No greater love hath a person than this, than that he should lay down his life for his friend." No greater love. I give my life in exchange for you, to defend you, to keep you, to protect you. But Jesus said, how much more is a love that you would lay down your life for a stranger? For a stranger. How many lives? How much assertiveness, how much boldness in the belief of love as a rule in the world have been laid down for me? This is what I'll be thinking about this Memorial Day. It's what I'll be pausing in silence in the worship gathering and the gathering for faith and life this coming Sunday at 10:30 on this channel. We end the service with the playing of taps. The trumpeter is playing at the tomb of the unknown soldier. It's a good and powerful and decent thing to mark the lives, not just of those we know that have laid down their lives for our life, but for the strangers who have done so. It's Memorial Day weekend. It's the days immediately following Pentecost when the power to live life with assertiveness and to pursue it with grace, to preach the gospel, to remind people that there's forgiveness in the world and that changes need to be made to correct the injustices of our society and of the way we live together, to not be afraid of investigating the truth of those broken places, confessing those sins, and then before God, asking God to forgive us and to make us representatives of God's all-encompassing love on this earth. It's Memorial Day. It's a day to thank God for the lives given, lost, for our freedom. God bless you, my friends. It's going to be a rainy Memorial Day weekend, so maybe it will be a somber one. It's okay. We have a lot to think about. We have a lot of grief and